Hello, I'm Jeff Allen with the Alliance for California's Economic Sustainability, or ACES. We start today's business lesson with the question, how much are communications issues costing your organization? To answer this very important question and to provide a solution for eliminating the costly effects of miscommunication in your business, we'll hear from sales and leadership expert Ja Marr Brown. For over 20 years, Ja Marr has generated tens of millions of dollars in sales for corporations as a senior level sales and management executive and business consultant. He has received numerous awards such as Salesperson of the Year, Sales Manager of the Year, and he's also authored 2 books. Ja Marr is a highly sought after keynote speaker and sales and management consultant, and today he serves as the Director of Sales and Consulting Services for ACES. Ja Marr Brown, welcome. It's nice to see you.
Jeff, thank you very much. Good to see you too.
Ja Marr, tell us a little bit. Let's start by talking about some of the examples of how poor communication can affect a business.
You know, Jeff, that's a really good question, and that's really the purpose of our seminar today is to understand how much communication issues are truly costing a business. And I think the best way to frame the answer would be to tell you a story that our viewers can relate to. I received a call from a physician, a client of mine, several months ago, and he called me about 8 o'clock at night, and he was frantic. He said, Ja Marr, I have this issue that I need your help with. I said, okay, Dr. Jones. I use a different name to protect the guilty. And he says, well, here's what happened. I performed a procedure on a patient, a cataract procedure. It went really well. The patient was happy, I was happy, and the patient raved about how great the service was. Then I had to go on vacation. Well, someone in my staff scheduled the patient to come in for a follow-up visit during the time I was on vacation. So the patient comes to the office that day and says, I'm here to see Dr. Jones. And my staff person at the front desk says, well, you know, I'm sorry, Mrs. Smith, Dr. Jones isn't here today. And then Mrs. Smith said, well, that's impossible, or why is that? Because I was scheduled to come in. And the person at the front desk, instead of trying to work with the patient, made the patient feel like it was her fault. She said, well, Mrs. Smith, obviously it's your mistake. Dr. Jones isn't here, and we do a really good job of letting patients know when the doctor is going to be here so they don't waste their time to come in. And so Mrs. Smith started to get really upset, and she said, well, I don't appreciate the fact that I had to drive 30 miles to come in and the way I'm being dealt with. And she stormed out of the office. Dr. Smith is oblivious to what happened. So he comes back, or Dr. Jones, he comes back from his vacation, and he gets a letter in the mail from the patient. Opens the letter, he's thinking it's a thank you note because of how great his experience was with the patient. And the patient wrote this scathing letter about how unprofessional the practice was, how bad the communication was in the practice, how she had to waste her time, her energy, and her gas and coming back to the office on a day he wasn't there. And she even threatened to sue the doctor as a result. Yeah. And I said, well, so Dr. Jones, what did you do? He said, Ja Marr, I was upset. So I called a staff meeting. And I called all my staff into my office. During the day, I had patients. And I basically just blew up on the entire staff. I said, I can't believe we're this unprofessional. I can't believe this communication is so bad in our organization. And how could this happen? And if it happens again, I'm going to start letting people go. And then he stormed out of the meeting. And I said, okay, knowing what was going to happen. And I said, so what happened? He said, well, at the end of the day, 2 of my employees walk into my office, and they both have resignation letters for me. And they're saying that they were really upset because they weren't involved in the issue, but they were brought into it, and they were blamed for something they didn't have any involvement with. One employee was someone that really wasn't someone he really wanted to keep around. The other one was one of his star employees that he really wanted to keep. And so the reason why our discussion today is so important is because we're going to dive into that example of poor communication, what it's going to cost your business and your office and your practice in terms of lost revenue and lost sales and employee morale. And I'm going to give you a way to deal with communication issues so we can go from them costing you money to creating money for the business.
Well, Ja Marr, that's a great example, a great way to start, an example of how bad communication can really negatively impact a business's operations, its brand, its ability to generate revenue, and keep its employees. And with that said, let's go ahead and get this underway. This lesson, Colorizing Your Communication with Ja Marr Brown.
Jeff, thank you very much, and I want to welcome everyone to today's lesson. And the topic of the show is actually colorizing your communication. I'm going to provide you with some real-world examples on how to deal with the costly effects of miscommunication in your business. And if you can relate to the story I told earlier about Dr. Jones and the issue that miscommunication or poor communication can cause in an organization, and if you have examples like that in your own organization, this program is for you. So the question is, how much are communication issues costing your business? And so let's break down the issue with Dr. Jones to see from the cascade of events that happen, how that negative communication, miscommunication affected his entire business. And if you can relate to that story, how it may be affecting your business as well. So let's look at a few things. Number one, miscommunication or poor communication can create low morale in an organization. If your employees don't feel like they're being communicated with effectively or there's poor communication, of course that leads to low morale. The second thing is high turnover. As we saw from the example with Dr. Jones, he had 2 employees that put in their resignation letter as a result of the communication issues that happened in his business. Low productivity, if people aren't feeling like they are going to work and being communicated with effectively or they're a valued member of the team, of course productivity is going to go low. Another big one is customer satisfaction. As you heard from the story, Mrs. Smith went from having a very good interaction with the doctor and the procedure and giving her money to the practice, going from there to all of a sudden being very upset with the practice because of poor communication and even threatening to sue, which obviously is probably an exaggeration on her part. However, we do know that when there is poor customer satisfaction, it affects the entire business. The other thing that it does, when you look at the social media aspect of poor communication, Mrs. Smith is now probably going to get on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and any other vehicle she can find to express her frustration and her negative opinions about the experience she had at Dr. Jones's business or his office. And so that's going to affect referrals. It's going to affect the brand of the organization, because when people are looking for physicians, they're probably not going to want to go to a physician that has that type of negative information about their business online. And so we can see that customer satisfaction is a big part of poor communication. Another thing is poor retention. Now, retention is different from high turnover. Turnover is the percent of people that leave a business in a given period of time. Retention, in my opinion, is how do you retain the most important and critical members of your organization. And when you looked at Dr. Jones's example, there was one person that put in her resignation letter that wasn't the best employee, but still there's a cost to that employee leaving with trying to train someone else and trying to backfill that person's position. But then there was another employee that wanted to leave the organization who was actually a valued member of the team. And it is extremely costly to replace an employee that is considered very valuable on your team. And so when you look at poor communication and miscommunication, it definitely affects your ability to retain your good employees. Politics in the organization, when there's poor communication and miscommunication, then people in an organization begin to politic. They form groups, they form cliques, and they're out for themselves versus the good of the organization. And another area is around recruitment. And there's been companies that I've been hired to work for and consult with that wanted me to look at their business and help them understand what was wrong in their practice. And oftentimes it came down to poor communication in the practice. And I said, listen, if you want to become a world-class organization, you have to recruit the absolute best people you can find. And right now, because of the negative brand your company has, or because of the negative image, people aren't wanting to come to your business, aren't wanting to work for your company because there's such a bad connotation about your business in the workspace or in the area of social media and in the buzz about your company. And so these are all the issues that can affect an organization and can cost an organization money when there's poor communication or miscommunication. And the reason why I have the hidden fees sort of caution tape on the slide as well is because there are definite costs that are easy to understand with poor communication. If a patient is unhappy or a customer is unhappy, then you know if they don't come back to your company and they don't buy your product anymore, you know there's a direct cost of that. It makes sense, you get it. But then there are hidden fees, kind of like credit card companies and banks, in which they say this is what it would cost you, but then there's the fine print. So the fine print of something like poor customer satisfaction is not just the loss of that patient or that client or that customer, it's also how many other people will not come to your business, would not buy your product because of what that person said about your company and why they shouldn't do business with you. So it's really important to understand how much these issues are truly costing your business. However, one of the most important things we can do as business leaders, and if you're watching this program, if you're a manager, if you're a CEO, if you're a C-level manager in the business, it all starts with you. It all comes down to your effectiveness in the business. And sometimes that's the most difficult aspect to understand about communication. And so when I was talking with Dr. Jones, the first thing I asked him was, I said, well, Dr. Jones, what role did you play in the poor communication that happened between the patient and your office? And his first reaction was, well, Ja Marr, no, it's my staff's responsibility. I hire them and they're supposed to know what they're doing. And I said, Dr. Jones, I understand that, but the mistake that's often made is we don't provide the proper training around managerial skills, around leadership skills, or around good communication, but we have these expectations that people should already know. But if you haven't taken the time to address the culture of your organization, the vision, the mission, the values, and you haven't invested in really good communication skills training, and you're the person that writes the checks and you're the person that hires and fires people, then you have to take responsibility. So I said, Dr. Jones, let me tell you a story. And it's a story about a person who worked in a factory, and every day he would bring his lunch to work, and he would take out his sandwich, take out his juice, take a bite of his sandwich, and he would say, man, this sandwich tastes terrible. And every single day would be the exact same thing. He would take out his lunch bag, take out his sandwich, take out his juice, take a bite of the sandwich, and he would say, man, this sandwich tastes terrible. So after a few more days of this, one of his coworkers walked up to him and he said, Bill, listen, if you're so sick and tired of eating the same lunch every day, having the same sandwich every day, why don't you ask your wife to pack you something different for lunch? And then Bill looked up at him with a scowl and he said, listen, I don't have to change anything. I pack my own damn lunch. And so what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is that, Dr. Jones, you have the ability to affect the communication and the success of your business based on how you invest in good communication skills for your practice. And so you have to get to the root cause of issues in your organization. And in my 20 plus years of experience in working with companies and consulting for companies and sales and management and leadership, really it has always come down to two different things. One is when there's an issue, it's either an issue with the culture of the organization. The vision, the mission, the values are either not clear and people aren't on the same page, or they haven't been developed. But an equally important aspect of the culture of an organization is the communication within the organization. And you can't have a strong culture unless you have really good communication. And this cartoon here reads, to address this mistake, we must use root cause analysis. And the person goes on to say, the manager, I'll begin by saying it's not my fault. Well, I think as leaders of an organization, we have to understand that yes, we are fully responsible and able to affect the success of our organizations through our investment in building the culture of the organization, as well as, which is equally as important, is investing in good communication skills. And so this workshop today is all about how do we do that and how do we use personality profiles based on color to make that happen. So the objectives of today's program are, number one, how a recognition of colors can make the difference between effective and ineffective communication in an organization. The second thing is how to quickly identify and effectively communicate with the 4 key personality types to take your organization from having costs of miscommunication to revenue generated from having really good communication in the organization. And here are some statistics that are really important for you to understand from a business standpoint. 70% of small to mid-sized companies claim that ineffective communication is a primary concern. And I would argue that if you really dove into it a little bit deeper, you would see an even higher percentage of companies that would express that communication issues are their biggest concern. Here's another statistic when you look at the costs of poor communication and miscommunication. 100 companies with 100 employees spend about 17 hours a week clarifying communication issues, which translates to a cost of over $500,000. And that's from a company called 360-Degree Solutions. So there's a direct cost of dealing with communication issues. Think about that. 17 hours a week spent on dealing with issues as opposed to dealing with revenue generating situations and revenue generating operational principles within the organization. And here's another one that I can attest to from my past experience as a manager in a company. 29% of a manager's time is spent on personality conflicts. And a big part of effective communication is understanding the personality of the individuals within your organization and how to more effectively interact with each person based on their personality. But think about that. 29% of a manager's time is spent on personality conflicts. And if you're thinking about your own business, how does that translate to what you're dealing with every single day in your business? So where do these communication issues show up in an organization? And there's several areas, and here are just a few. One is what was communicated? What was the nature of the communication? The second thing is how it was communicated. And it's kind of funny, from a business standpoint, a communication standpoint, oftentimes it goes back to this statement, did you remember what I said when I said what I told you? And that's oftentimes how communication happens. People are so inclined to just communicate something, and they said, well, I told you, I said it, I emailed it, I twittered it, I Facebooked it. But the real key is what was received and what was heard by the person that was receiving the communication, not what was sent out. And oftentimes in organizations, we spend most of our time checking the box saying, I sent this to you, I communicated this, and I said that, as opposed to switching to what was received, what was heard. Do you understand what I'm trying to communicate? How the communication was interpreted. So no matter what was communicated or how it was communicated, how was it interpreted? And in a lot of organizations, you have people that like to be communicated with in different ways, whether it's through a live conversation, or through a text message, or through an email. And so if someone likes the live discussion and they are not inclined to looking at emails, but another person keeps sending them emails, then of course there's going to be an issue with communication because you didn't understand the best way to communicate with that person. And oftentimes communications get lost or dropped in organizations. The personality of the communicator. And this is something we're going to dive into in a few moments as I get into the personality profiles that I'm going to talk to you about. But the personality of the person that you're communicating with and your own personality can make the difference between effective and ineffective communication. And the last one is the situation surrounding the communication. What's happening around the time the communication is disseminated? Because in organizations, there's ebbs and flows. At certain times during the day, everyone's happy, sales are great, you won this big account, everyone's happy. But then there's times when fires need to be put out and everyone's on high alert. And you're trying to save accounts, you're trying to fix a manufacturing issue. And whatever is happening at the time of that communication directly affects the effectiveness of the communication. And the program we're going to walk through, which is Colorizing Your Communication, is going to help you understand that. So with that said, let's talk about the significance of understanding and defining communication within your organization. And let me give you a quick example as to how this change in your approach can generate significant revenue in your organization from effective communication versus the cost. Years ago, I was a manager of a sales team, and at the time they were ranked second to last in the nation, 20 out of 21, all right? Morale was low, productivity was low, no one was in the top 50% of sales results, and I was a new area sales manager taking on this team. Well, my objective for the team was to be the #1 team in the nation and have everyone make leadership council, which is top 20%, and to have people get promoted that were interested in being promoted. Well, of course, there was a lot of skepticism about my ability to influence that much change in the organization, but there were two things that I did that made a significant difference. One was we established an effective culture based on a principle called Kaizen, which is we're going to learn more about in future presentations. But essentially, we established a clear vision, mission, and values of the organization, which everyone bought into because they knew that their participation in the team culture not only benefited the team, but also benefited themselves. The second thing was we implemented the Colorizing Your Communication program within our team to establish very clear communication, to put us all on the same page, to have us all speaking the same language within our culture. And the results were absolutely staggering. We went from the second to last in the country that first year to #2 in the country the following year, and then to #1 in the country the year after that. So we went from pretty much last place to first place. And the additional revenue generation in terms of that increased market share and the results equated to a $30 million increase in revenue for the company that we were at. So that's the impact of understanding these color personality profiles and implementing this program in your organization. But there's a gap, and the gap is where you are now versus where you'd like to be. And oftentimes we say, like Dr. Jones said, we need to increase communication now. Well, how are you going to do that? Because what is being communicated right now is creating issues, and the process of the communication is creating issues. And so you can't just go in there and say, we're going to affect communication and improve your communication without providing your employees with a platform for doing so, with some very clear tools for effective communication, which are easy to understand, which can create immediate results, and which can immediately increase the morale of your organization, which can increase productivity. And so this program is designed to take you from where you're at today with whatever communication issues you're having in your organization to help you to get to where you want to be in a very productive organization with high morale, with employees that really want to be there, that are communicating very effectively. And so we have to change our mindset a little bit. And there's a quote by Dr. Wayne Dyer, who's one of the foremost thought leaders on personal development. But the quote is, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And just like with my sales team years ago, when I said our current thoughts and behaviors and communication and culture is generating these results, which aren't very good. We're at the bottom of the rankings, no one's being considered for a promotion, and we're looked at as a joke in the organization. So if we want to go from there to being a high performing organization, we have to change our thoughts, and we have to change our behaviors, and we have to change the way we look at things. And the Communicating in Color, our Colorizing Your Communication program was directly responsible for the change that happened in our organization. And that's why I'm so adamant about teaching this to organizations that I consult with that have seen phenomenal results over the past 15 years. So now let's break it down. What is the program and how does it work? Essentially, it's based on colors. Now, there's a lot of different personality programs out there. And I've been through all of them. There's some that are based on animals. You're a jaguar, you're a lion, and that type of thing. There's some that's based on different verbiage like type A, you're a driver, and you're an analytical person. And all of those are great, and whatever you invest in makes a lot of sense. The reason why the Colorizing Your Communication program has been so effective is because it's easy to understand. It's based on colors, and employees can use it literally not just at work, but also in their personal lives. And so it really has immediate impact. And it deals with the 4 key personality types, and it assigns a color to each personality type. So let's break it down. There's the blue personality type, which is a person that basically says, let's do it right. Let's get it done right. Then there's a red personality profile, which is let's do it now. They're more of the drivers and the type A personalities. Then you have the green personality type, which is a person that says, let's do it in a caring way. Let's all come together and figure this out together. Then you have the yellow personality type, which is let's do it all together and have a big party afterwards. They're the ones that are gregarious, they're outgoing, they're fun-loving, and they just want to have fun while they're doing it. And each of these personality types are important to understand, because when you talk to a person, they're going to present one or a combination of these colors to you. And so the more effective you are at understanding their personality type and your own and matching them, the more effective the communication is going to be. So let's break down each color in a bit more detail. Let's start with the red personality type, and these are the drivers. And as you know, in an organization, we have our good days and our bad days. So on a good day, a red personality type is results-oriented and purposeful. They are determined and strong-willed, and they are demanding and competitive. They're going to help drive the organization. However, on a bad day, when there's an issue with manufacturing, when there's a problem with an employee, when there's something that goes wrong, this is what happens to red individuals. They become pushy and controlling. They become domineering and intolerant, and also sometimes they have this must-win at all costs mentalities. And keep in mind, this is not a good or bad thing. Whatever color that you are or your employees are is not good or bad, because everyone possesses each of these colors to some degree. The important thing is, how do we effectively interact with each of these individuals, knowing how they are on a good day and how they are on a bad day? So let's discuss that. Some of the body language to understand when you're dealing with the red individual are to help you identify a person that has a red personality type. Is they're aggressive? They usually give you a firm handshake, a lot of hand gestures, kind of like I'm doing. You could tell I have a lot of red in my personality as well. Formal. Sometimes they're quiet, they're observed, they're kind of reserved. They're looking to see what this is all about. non-expressive in the face oftentimes because they're thinking about what you're saying, and they can become distracted. So how do we deal with red individuals? By understanding what causes stress, what can bring issues to a red person. So some of the things in an organization that brings stress to a red person, that makes them have a bad day, is a lack of focus. When people are indecisive, because these individuals like to make decisions fairly quickly. And being out of control, when things are unorganized and all over the place, they're the ones that say, let's stop everything, let's get it done now, get it done right, and let's stop all the other nonsense. And so they can become aggressive, impatient, irritable, and demanding. So how do you effectively deal with a person that is red? Here are a couple of examples. Allow for fast action, knowing that they're going to move in a fast pace. Just understand that. They make decisions quick. And so if you're dealing with a red individual, try and make decisions a bit more quickly. Take a break or a timeout. When things are out of control, sometimes it's important to just say, let's all stop, come together, and then get refocused. And then put them in control of situations, because they like to be in control. So that's some basics about a red personality type. The next personality type I want to deal with is the blue personality type. And these are the analyzers in the organization. Oftentimes they're found in accounting or finance. They're the analytical people. So on a good day, they're cautious and calm, they're formal and precise, and also they're quiet and analytical. However, on a bad day, this is what you will see from a person with a dominant blue personality profile. They're prodding and cold, distant and indecisive, and also they can become withdrawn and rigid. And I'm going to give you an example in a couple minutes about a real world scenario of a blue personality type dealing with a red personality type. So sometimes the body language of a blue individual, and this will help you identify if a person has a blue type of personality, they can become detached oftentimes. They sometimes avoid touch and that firm handshake. The eye contact is kind of intermittent. They don't always give you eye contact. They can be very reserved. They may sit back and just analyze you and not be very expressive. And also they're oftentimes very calm, because they're the ones that are thinking, how do I make all this work? How do I put all these things together? How do the numbers line up with the plan that's being put in front of me? Some of the stress causes are lack of information, structure, and logic, poor quality work, and time wasted are tasks rushed. So let me give an example of this instead of going through the entire slide. There was a marketing manager that I worked with who came from sales, and obviously in sales you're fast-paced, you're moving, you're closing deals, and oftentimes you don't deal with the details. So the salesperson was put in a marketing position, overseeing a really huge budget in the organization, and was tasked with working with the director of finance on putting together budgets and financial plans for this person's products. Well, there was immediate conflict because the salesperson wasn't very detail-oriented, didn't really take the time to review all of his work, and would just send information to the finance person and say, here, look at this. And the work really wasn't done with the level of detail it should have been done. Well, the finance person was a very pleasant individual, all of a sudden became very cold and poignant with the marketing person, because she was upset because she wasn't getting information the way that she wanted it to, which was very organized, detail-oriented, well thought out and planned. And so I worked with both of these individuals to help them understand these are the two personality types we're dealing with. One is very red, which is get it done and make it happen. One is very blue, which is more analytical. And so we developed a plan for them to work together for the red person, not to all of a sudden become this analytical accounting finance person, because that wasn't in his nature. However, to work with the finance person to get their input up front, work with them directly on a plan, which brought the finance person in early in on the project, and she was able to help this person figure out what to do and how to do it. And so over time, their relationship blossomed, and they really formed a really strong partnership, and they both made each other look good, and were both happy and got out of it what they wanted to get out of it. If they hadn't gone through this personality profile, if they didn't understand each person's tendencies, or were unwilling to look beyond what they were trying to do and look at what the other person needed from them, then this relationship would have blown up. And we've seen that happen in many organizations. And if you see that in your organization, once again, this type of personality profile with colorizing your communication will be very effective. Now let's look at a green person. Oftentimes, green individuals are misunderstood, especially in the sales function. People, think that sales people should be type A, aggressive, and go get them. And the green individuals are more caring. They really want to look at the good of the organization. They want to make sure that what they contribute to the organization is benefiting people as well as themselves. So on a good day, a green personality type is caring and encouraging, trusting and emotional, and they're cautious and unassuming. On a bad day, and I'm sure you've seen this with individuals that you're thinking in your mind have a green tendency, it can become smothering and patronizing. It can become very sarcastic because for them, it's about trust. And when that trust is shaken, they become very sarcastic and very questioning, and they become doubtful. They can also become suspicious and irrational, and they also can become withdrawn or slow to start. And I'm sure you could think of people in your organization that one day they seem very calm and giving, and they're participatory, and then all of a sudden they're withdrawn. They don't respond. They're slow to act, and oftentimes it's because somehow in some way the trust in their mind has been broken. And there's ways to rebuild that trust, which we'll talk about. But that's what happens with a green personality type. And so some of the body language from a green individual, they're relaxed, facial expressions, because they care and they want to be a part of something. A handshake or even a hug. They're the people that are the huggers in the organization. And sometimes it could be considered shy and avoid eye contact. So once again, this is one of the reasons why if you have a person in your organization that's green, that all of a sudden has become withdrawn and sort of not very participatory, this may be the reason why. Because there was some unfair or impersonal treatment. They saw a violation of the rules in the organization, or there were interruptions or time pressure. So once again, the stress signals are they can become silent and withdrawn. So how do you effectively interact with a person that's green? Enhance personal contact to restore trust. They don't like the impersonal email or the text message. They want you to come into their office and sit down and talk to them and interact and work on things together, be collaborative. Also, be more sincere and empathetic. And sometimes a red individual can be seen as insincere because they are such a driver. However, if you understand how you're coming off as a red person and how that green individual needs you to help them understand why you're that way, why we're making decisions, then you'll create a very strong ally with a green personality type. And also put your desires and needs on hold momentarily. If you help them get what they want, if you understand who they are, they become the glue of the organization. And an organization without green individuals can fall apart because green individuals keep everyone together. They keep the structure and the flow and the heart of the organization in place. So those are some ways to deal with a person that's green. Now here's the yellow personality profile type, and this is my favorite one because this is the first time that I fully grasped the significance of understanding colors, and I'll explain that story in a second. But a yellow individual is the engager in the organization. Look in the picture, this person is expressive, there's hand signals, they're caring and encouraging, they're trusting and emotional. They're the person that will come into the room and light up the room. You know they're there because it's loud. On a bad day, they can also become frenetic and unstructured, flamboyant and unrealistic, and also indiscreet and sometimes win at all costs. So when you see a person that is a happy-go-lucky type person and you start to see some of these things, here's some of the reasons. Those are some of the reasons why. What are some of the body language clues to knowing that a person is yellow? Very open, they're responsive, they're expressive, they firm handshake or hug, they a lot of gestures, they lean forward like I'm doing, and sometimes they're also laid back. Some of the stress causes to a yellow person: restriction on flexibility. They like the ability to be able to be who they are and do things their way and have fun doing it. So in a very structured environment, a person that's yellow will have a very difficult time dealing with that. No interaction or fun. If it's just a bland situation, if it's just very formal and there's no ability to have fun and use their personality, they become stressed. And so here's what you'll see. Over-responsive. They become overly communicative because they want to be a part of something. They appear opinionated and also argumentative. And once again, because they want to be heard. They want their opinion to be out there. They want people to communicate. And that's what they're trying to do. So the solutions are allow room for maneuver. Let them be who they are. Let their personalities shine. Be more engaging. Reach out. Pick up the phone and call them. Don't just text or email. Schedule one-on-one meetings. Suggest brainstorming. Once again, bring them into the fold. Make them a part of the solution. And move on to something different. Sometimes they get bored easily, so move on to something different. And so here's an example of a red versus a yellow personality. When I first became a manager, I was a very red person, a very driver, and I thought management was all about cracking the whip and being very aggressive. And I had an employee who was a yellow individual who liked to have fun. And so we literally did not get along for the first several months until we went through this program, and I realized that this person's approach, although it was different from mine, being more direct and more aggressive, there was no problem with that, because she needed for me to be more engaging, to help her become part of the program, to involve her in everything, and for me to be less rigid and to allow her fun to be a part of the team and to be a part of our approach. So we did a number of things where we go on sales rides together, and we would take a break and go to the batting cages or go grab a cup of coffee and just engage. And this person really enjoyed that, and as a result, our relationship became stronger. This person went on to be a very effective person on the team and a very high-level sales professional. So we're going to get into more of dealing with different personality types and more examples when we have a Q&A session later on, but that's just one example of how your personality type can conflict with another one, and if you understand how to bring the two together and understand each other, you can go from a poor relationship to a very effective relationship. So now, here's the thing I want to start to wrap up with, and that is perception is reality. We all think we know who we are. You might say, I'm a red person, I'm yellow, I'm green, or I'm blue, and that may or may not be true. The key thing is, what does a person think of you that is interacting with you? And it's just like this cartoon. You might say 4, they say 3. And so their perception is really the significant part of the interaction. So understanding their color personality profile and yours will make a significant difference. And we do a workshop when we run this program. We look at how we view each other. On a good day, I view this person as, which is oftentimes different from what they see. And if the two parties come together and understand, it's not only a fun exercise, but it really helps to build and strengthen communication in organizations. And the same thing goes with, on a bad day, I view this person as, and we do a workshop on that. So, to sum it up, we possess all 4 colors all the time. And which color we leverage depends on 2 things. Who we're working with, the person we're interacting with, and their personality profile, and also what you're working on. And so when you engage in the Colorizing Your Communication program, it will not only lower the cost of negative or miscommunication in your organization, it will also increase revenue, increase morale, increase productivity, because the communication in your organization is much more effective. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to be a part of this program today. And now we're going to turn it over to Jeff, who I believe has some questions from some of our viewers.
Thanks very much, Ja Marr. This was really a very insightful and exciting lesson we had today in the art of communication and communicating effectively for an effective business. We've got some questions here I'd like to kind of talk to you a little bit about. First of all, what is the root cause of most communications problems in an organization?
You know, Jeff, the root cause of most communication issues in an organization is the myth that communication actually took place. A lot of people think that something was communicated, but was it really communicated? And there's a number of reasons, for that. One is, from a personality standpoint, a person communicates something in a way that the other person doesn't receive well. And there's examples in organizations from all over the globe around that happening. Someone says something to someone else, and their language, or not their language, when I say language, I mean corporate language, and with their personality, with the way they say it, the other person doesn't receive it as well as the person meant for it to be received. And so there's already a conflict. And I mentioned some examples earlier when I went through the presentation. So really the issue is that people think that communication happened. They think because they sent an email or called someone that something is going to happen or it was well received, but oftentimes what was said was not received. So there's a myth behind the communication.
What are some of the most challenging color types?
Jeff, it's interesting. Everyone possesses all 4 colors, and it kind of depends on the situation at hand. And when I do these workshops, it's funny, I'll have everyone group themselves by the color they think they are. So we'll have a red group, a yellow group, a blue group, and a green group. And green usually has the least number of people in the group. Usually it's red and yellow, and because usually I work with sales organizations. And then I say, okay, well, let's look at what people think you are, because they've already assessed each other. And when they look at what someone thinks they are, oftentimes those groups shift and people go from the red side to the yellow side and so forth and so on. The other thing is when there's an issue in the organization, and I'll say, on a good day, how do you feel? When you go to work, how do you feel? And then put yourself in that color. And oftentimes people will go to green or yellow, they're happy, having a good time. Then I'll say, okay, boom, there's a manufacturing problem. There's a sales issue. You lost a major account. There's layoffs, or whatever the case may be. Now what do you do? And then people run to the different colors. And so you can see how throughout the course of a day, people shift their colors. And the time of the communication is a direct reflection on what's happening in the organization and how effective that communication is. And so to specifically answer your question, in general, opposite colors have the most conflict. Red and yellow. Red is sort of the driver type A, and yellow is sort of the, have fun and have a good time while we're doing it. And I had that conflict, and I've coached most people on how to deal with red versus yellow. Look at even a color of a green versus a red. A red person is someone that wants to drive everything and get things done. At least that's the perception. Whereas a green person may see that as someone who is trying to be controlling or manipulative, or they don't really care about the organization or that person. So the green person may shy away. So understanding opposite personality types of a red yellow or red green is really important to this effectiveness of communication in an organization.
So why is the Coloring Your Communications program so effective?
Well, because I've used it myself. And that's what really makes me a strong believer in this program. I first was exposed to the program years ago as a brand new sales manager, and I told the story earlier when I didn't have any management experience, to go over a team that was second to last, and it was like, what do I do? And the first thing was to develop a strong culture in the organization. But the second aspect was providing an effective way for us to communicate. Communication was the biggest issue within our team, with each other, between myself and the team, and between the salespeople and the customer. It was all about miscommunication or poor communication. And so I had a consultant come in, and he trained us on this color process. And I used it over the next several years and saw staggering results in organizations I worked at, and where teams went from bottom place in sales, not making money and costing the company money because of miscommunication or poor communication, to generating tens of millions of dollars just based on improved communications in the organization. And so when I stepped out and started doing consulting myself, I basically took on this program and bought it because I was such a strong believer in it. So, and to this day, every company that I've done this program with, even my former sales team years ago, they still talk about the colors. They still refer to their personality as colors. They still relate this to other people in their professional world. And quite interestingly enough, their spouses and their boyfriends and girlfriends have also been brought into the fold because they want to learn more about the color personality profile process. And it has improved their communication, not only in organizations, but also in their personal lives. And so it lasts forever, basically.
So it has staying power. You've seen the results not only in your career, but in the businesses that you've consulted with. How long does it take before you start seeing these changes take place?
Well, a couple of things. Whenever I like to be very upfront with the people that hire me to come in and do consulting, whether it's a C-level executive, the CEO, or a manager, and I say, well, and then we're going to talk about the process and about your team, and because they say, Ja Marr, my team is this, my company is this. And I said, well, the first thing you have to do is look in the mirror, because the effectiveness of the organization and the effectiveness of this program, whether it's building your culture or colorizing your communication, starts with you. Just like with the example of Dr. Jones earlier, he was quick to say what his staff was doing wrong, and I said, well, have you provided proper training for your staff? Have you invested in communication skills training? The answer is no. Well, who writes the check? You do. And it's in your best interest to, number one, take on the program yourself, and then apply it to your organization, because they're going to follow your lead. And so if you get commitment from the person in charge, the manager, the C-level executive, the CEO, and they go through it, the results can be immediate because the organization sees that you're committed to making the change. And once they go through the program, it's fun, it's entertaining, it's exciting. They get it, people remember it, and so they want to do it. And so change can be immediate if you have the commitment and if you make the investment.
So you've got Tom, the CEO, is sitting back saying, I've learned a lot here. This is fantastic, and I can see this actually working. But come on, it's, 6 or 7 months down the line, we're going to lapse, we're going to have a relapse, we're going to go back into the problems, the issues that we'd had. How long can the change actually last? The positive changes that come from this program actually last?
Well, with anything, there has to be follow-up. I mean, this is a program that, once again, if you have the commitment and you invest in it, you will see an immediate change in your company, an immediate change in the level of communication effectiveness in your organization. That's how powerful the program is at the start. However, with anything, it requires ongoing training and development. Their managers have to follow the program. They have to abide by it. They can't just, say, well, this is what you guys are going to do, and I'm not going to be part of it. So the more that they're part of the program, the more that they invest in it, the longer the change will happen. But the beauty is, unlike other programs that I've seen, the results are immediate. And because you're dealing with the color personality profile that's very easy for people to understand and relate to, you start to see the language of the organization change immediately. So you will see immediate results, but once again, if you want anything to last long term, you have to continue to invest in it.
And obviously, the key selling points behind this program are going to be the results, or the benefits that a company gets from implementing the Colorizing Your Communication program. Let's talk about some of those benefits.
Let's use some real world examples, because if I'm someone that's watching the program, I want to know, well, how much money did it deliver to my organization? What did it really do? And I mentioned things like improving morale, better retention in organizations. And let me give you some examples of that. With Dr. Jones, for example, he had 2 people that were going to resign. He had low morale, low productivity in his organization. He brought me in immediately to do a workshop with his entire staff. Well, guess what? The person that was the star employee that put her resignation on his desk stayed with the organization and became an agent for change. The communication and the practice improved significantly. They were happy that Dr. Jones said, you know what? I apologize for the way that I approached this situation, and I realized I haven't invested in proper communication skills training, so let's bring in Ja Marr Brown. I did the program. They liked the fact that he was engaged, he bought into it, and the results were immediate. Productivity went up, morale increased, and the whole nine. I mentioned with my sales team, when we went from second to last in the morning of the country, that was a $30 million increase in revenue. I did this with the New York Life Insurance Company with some of their agents. And their sales from the individual agents also increased significantly because they were better able to understand the personalities of the person that they were dealing with and relate to them better. And oftentimes in sales, it's about relationships. Well, how can you have an effective relationship if you don't understand who the person is? And this program will help do that. And so there's tons and tons of examples of when you have better communication, revenue is increased, issues from poor communication are decreased, morale goes up, productivity goes up, better retention, and ultimately, a business can't run unless there's revenue being generated. And so the better the communication is with your staff and your employees and your customers, the higher the revenue. And that's exactly what this program does.
And basically the bottom line, great communication is the foundation of success for any business. Ja Marr, thanks very much. I appreciate it. A great talk today. And as we found out today, in fact, that successful communication that's been successfully colorized can be the great foundation to the success for any successful business. Colorizing Your Communication is an engaging and eye-opening program designed to teach your staff how to quickly identify and effectively communicate with the 4 most common personality types in order to eliminate the costly effects of miscommunication. If you have any questions regarding today's business lesson for Ja Marr, please use the comments questions box below. For more information or to book Ja Marr Brown for a seminar, workshop, or as a consultant, please call 951-781-8624 or email us at info@acescalifornia.org.